I think. I think I'm live. Am I live? I think I'm live. Okay. I think I'm just going to go with it. Nobody's typing in chat letting me know that they can hear me. So if you can't hear me, please type something and let me know. Let me change mics or cameras real quick. Let's go with this view. So now you should be seeing my desktop. And we're going to start off by talking about the Juniper certification tracks themselves. So let me bring this up here. Yeah, we're going to get to the topology. That's a really cool thing. And then we're going to talk about how I built the topology. Let me also bring up the little chat log. So, okay, so I got an all good. Thank you for letting me know that it's all good. So let's talk about the Juniper certification tracks in the first place, because this is where I think it's actually really unique and different. Look at this right here. JNCIA Junos, JNCIA Junos, and JNCIA Junos. This exam goes for the data center, for service provider, and for enterprise routing and switching. So the starting point for whether you're going for the data center track, the enterprise track, or the service provider track all starts with JNCIA Junos. And the important word there is Junos. I mean, yeah, there is some networking stuff to it. You're going to learn about routing and stuff as you progress through this journey. But really, the essence, the spirit of the JNCIA Junos exam is more about, do you understand how the operating system really works and how does it contrast to other vendors? It's not so much about learning, this is what you do to get up and running, and get like a base config in place, even though you do kind of cover that. It's more about what makes Junos different. How does Junos really work under the hood, and what makes it resilient, and what makes it fast, and what are the different ways that we can actually configure Junos to do our will and our bidding? The interesting things about the JNCIA Junos is that it immediately takes you into like some of the more robust things that you wouldn't see until the advanced level of other certification vendors. What I'm talking about here is policies. Let's actually jump into JNCIA Junos real quick, and then I will get to service provider for just a second. But I think it's as important to talk about this as we get into it. So I clicked on the service provider certification path, and it tells you this is your path forward. You got JNCIA Junos, then you can go to specialist, then professional, then expert, but it all starts with Junos. So if I scroll down and we look at these exam objectives, look like routing policy and firewall filters here. This is actually some pretty advanced level stuff. Ultimately, what you're talking about here isn't necessarily just policy-based routing. You could be getting into how to affect policies on routes or routing tables. In other words, like how do we do route redistribution, and how do we alter metrics and things like that. Like this is like, wait a minute, like this is at the associate level. That kind of caught me off guard. And then you do learn about routing protocols themselves, some big routing protocols throughout the JNCIA journey. But a lot of this stuff, when you look at the Junos fundamentals, it's, getting used to the configuration basics, the operational and monitoring parts of Junos, and how does Junos actually itself operate, like Junos fundamentals. I think this is actually really interesting stuff. I took JNCIA Junos in August 2016, and I found the exam to be very, very basic. This time around, they overhauled it and threw some stuff at me that I was not ready for. That being said, I studied for 2 or 3 days and passed the exam, but again, I was very comfortable with Junos at this point after working with the platform and the products for years. In a previous job, when I was in consulting for IT, we were almost, exclusively Juniper, and I just have a lot of experience with Juniper's platform. So a lot of the stuff on the exam wasn't necessarily new to me, but what caught me off guard was seeing things like policies and how you actually manipulate the policies and the routing protocols themselves already at the associate level. Now let's jump into service provider. So service provider is new to me in general. This is my first foray into the service provider world, and I can tell you up front, pardon my French, but service provider kicked my ass for a few weeks. After going for like the expert level certifications, I felt like I'm rock solid. I'm going to roll in here and crush this stuff. And I did not realize how robust MPLS really is. I didn't. My experience with MPLS up till this point was like enabling MPLS. using LDP to automatically discover neighbors and exchange forwarding paths, and then tracking the underlying IGP. So that's how it, finds its path from one end of the network to the other using LDP. That was my experience with it, is just turn it on and let LDP do its thing. When you get into the service provider world, the actual service provider world, and you jump into MPLS, you really got to understand that guy right there, RSVP. RSVP is an alternative to LDP. And, okay, so MPLS is, it's label switching. It's hard to describe. It's layer 2.5. But MPLS is not the routing protocol that discovers the paths from one end to the next. It's just the functionality of using labels in order to switch a packet. LDP and RSVP are two of the protocols that actually discover the paths from one end to the next. LDP is the more dynamic of the two. You just turn it on and it does some discoveries. You can manipulate it a little bit, but it's not really used for traffic engineering, whereas RSVP is very explicit. You tell it an entry point and an exit point, and it will find the path there, and then you can give it constraints as to how to find the path. You can make bandwidth reservations, and I cover that in a previous YouTube video on CSPF. Let me check the chat log real quick. I just want to make sure everybody's doing okay. Okay, so far nobody's complaining, so that's some good news. So anyways, yeah, so, and when we think about service providers, like, their lifeblood, for the most part, is MPLS, BGP, and then some form of IGP. I will say that studying expert-level design really, really helped me, and so I'll tell you right now, my passing score was a 68%. I scored, 78%. I passed with a 78%, and I feel like I leaned heavily on my expertise in OSPF, ISIS, and BGP in order to get through this exam. What I will say is, when you see like all of these topics here on this exam blueprint, like spanning tree, layer 2 bridging, BGP, ISIS protocol, all of this stuff, this is what I'll say is, it's not that this is misleading. All of these topics, you should know all of these topics and be prepared to talk about all of these topics on the exam. I'm going to go ahead and say that on some of these topics, you need to go a step further. You need to go into the professional level, because there was legitimately stuff when I walked into my exam that I had never seen before. And I thought I had done a really good and thorough job studying. I went through all the Junos Genius content. I took all the practice exams, and then I labbed. I labbed a lot. And there was legitimately stuff where I was like, I have no clue what that is. So when you look at these things like MPLS and RSVP or BGP and OSPF, my advice to you, actually, let me show you, without giving anything away, because I'm not going to violate the NDA, I'm just going to bring up the console of one of these devices here. My advice to you is, when you go into the configuration and you're looking at like the MPLS, this is my MPLS configuration using CSPF, putting in constraints like BFD, paths, bandwidth reservations, the ingress and egress routers. My advice to you is, when it comes time to actually configure these items, so if I go to edit protocols, MPLS, and let me do show real quick. Let's say I go into edit label switch path to VMX4, hit set, and then hit question mark, and get to know these things. That's the best advice that I can give you without giving anything away. I'm not going to sit here and say you need to know every single one of these things, but you should have at least hit this question mark and looked at them and read what it is that they do. Because like I say, there were a lot of nitty-gritty features and things that I was asked about. Actually, I don't know if I can say that. Let me take that. I'm sorry if I just said something I wasn't supposed to. There were things on this exam that I think the outline here doesn't necessarily explain how deep you really need to go, and I think you need to go deeper than what is set up right here. God, I really hope I didn't give too much away there. I guess what I'm just trying to say is, get to know not only the basics and your understanding of the configuration, but definitely take it a step further and try to get into the professional level so that you're not blindsided by stuff like I was. Again, fair exam. Very fair exam. Very passable exam. Junos Genius gave you, or at least gave me, the content that I felt that I needed to pass the exam and be successful. Again, the service provider world was wildly new to me, so I studied for about 2 weeks. For someone who's brand new to service provider, I would say you need to study 2 to 4 weeks. I almost exclusively use Junos Genius for this, although I was also reading a textbook called Mpls in the SDN Era. That's the name of it, Mpls in the SDN Era. That book is really recommended more for the professional or expert level, but it is very real world. So it was nice to see things like, oh, that's the actual design of where you would use this feature versus that feature and how BGP operates on top of it and that type of stuff. So yeah, I think, don't walk into this exam thinking like it's going to be a breeze. It is definitely a challenging exam. You'll need a few weeks to prep for it. And you will want to get as much hands-on practice as you possibly can using lab tools like EVE-NG like I've done here. So you may be wondering, where can I get the images? These are the VMX routers. That is going to be your choice for the JNCIS service provider. Over here on the Juniper downloads, let me just clear the screen right here. If you go to Juniper downloads and you have a Juniper account, you can download these images for free. They're under the evaluation. Fair warning, when you first set up an account, you probably won't have permission to. You'll have to set up a support chat with them. You can just set up a little chat right there in the bottom right corner. See Get Support. If my head's not in the way, you'll click Get Support, and you'll just walk through the process of getting support. And eventually you'll get to an actual person, and you tell them, I'm just trying to get access to the evaluation images. So you can, right here in the product name, search for VMX. You see VMX evaluation, and you will see the one that you're looking for here is going to be the KVMs. That's what you're looking for, and you download those. And then you can follow the steps on EVE-NG or the EVE-NG documentation to get them imported. Also worth pointing out, you'll see here there's actually 2 devices that are located on here that make up one Juniper device. This is a big thing about Juniper. If you look at a Juniper device, it's a box, right? And you're just looking at a router or a switch. Under the hood, Juniper has basically separated these literally underneath the box into 2 separate devices. On one side, you have your control plane, and on your other side, you have your data plane, and they communicate to each other over a link, almost like as if it was an Ethernet link that they communicate to each other. They call this section the routing engine and this section the packet forwarding engine, and that's exactly what you're looking at here. We have the routing engine, which is what you connect to in order to actually enter the commands, and then you have the packet forwarding engine, which is what is actually forwarding the packets throughout the domain. These connect, if you can barely see it right there, there's a little interface here called INT. The routing engine and the packet forwarding engine communicate to each other that way. So if I were to add one onto the plane right now, I'll choose VMX VCP, that's virtual control plane. I'll click save, and there's the control plane. It kind of looks like a little router image. Then I'll go to VMX virtual forwarding plane, VFP. I'll click save. And now to make this one logical unit, I'll drag these 2 together, and I will connect them on the INT interface and click save. So at this point, I can turn these devices on. I would use the VCP device to actually access the console, and I would make all the connections here between the forwarding planes and not the control planes. So that's how it works within EVE-NG. So download those images, and then follow the EVE-NG how-to steps, and then you've got your own lab. These things are a little hefty. Let's go under status real quick and see what I'm using. Yeah, so currently using 54% CPU, 33% RAM. Oh, there's a 70% spike in CPU. And I have, I think, 9 nodes on this topology that are turned on right now. So that's kind of it. So the way I built this lab out was following along a lot of like what the Junos Genius did. This is a customer edge. This is a customer edge. This is a customer edge. Here are my provider edges. right here. And these in here in the center are my provider cores. So that's how I built this up. I have an MPLS path going from this ingress to this egress. I have an MPLS path going from this ingress to this egress. And then I have return traffic paths going in this direction as well. Then I run BGP from here to here. I run BGP basically in the exact same places. Then I have an eBGP peering between my customer edges and provider edges. And then I ran GRE tunnels on top of the CE edges to the CE edges. So routing information is exchanged by BGP between the customer edges and the provider edges. MPLS is used to switch it through the provider background, and then GRE is used to tunnel traffic over the top. This is the type of stuff you need to know, there we go, how to do in order to take the JNCIS service provider, and it's not enough to know the basic commands. I mean, it's definitely like the core, that's what they want you to know, but additional features and how you can engineer this solution, I think is the essence of this exam, and is what leads into JNCIP, where you really got to know it. Things that really caught me off guard about this exam, let me just get there real quick, and then I'm going to jump to questions. I'm so sorry, I'm just getting carried away. Of course, MPLS, understanding RSVP, traffic engineering, and how you traffic engineer it with CSPF. Again, if you haven't watched my video on CSPF, go get a quick crash course on what does it really do. It's kind of fascinating. And then bridging. Bridging is pretty fascinating, I'll say, how we can extend a customer's layer 2 domain across the service provider backbone. I thought that was fascinating. And then the tunnels and high availability, I wasn't expecting these to be as challenging as they were, because again, I guess I'm so accustomed to that stuff coming in the advanced or professional level tiers, and glad I labbed these things. Let me put it to you that way. Because they really want you to know this stuff. Look at these blueprints here. This is one of those examples where I think like they tell you, like, just demonstrate knowledge of how to configure GRE and IP. Junos Genius, I think will get you some of the way there, but not all the way there. You really need to jump on the command line, hit that question mark, and experiment with some things, read some Junos documentation in order to prepare for this exam. So that was my experience with the and as far as the actual proctor situation goes, like I started the exam, I checked in at 9:10, I was ready for 9:15, and the exam didn't start until close to 9:45. So I was very stressed out waiting for the proctor to arrive, and I'd started like a ticket going. But challenging exam, fun exam. If you work in a service provider world, especially with Juniper, or if you're working with Juniper and interested in service provider world, this exam is for you. If you are new to the service provider world, I would say this exam is for you, because the training resources on Junos Genius were great. I know you're going to ask, is CVT Nuggets going to come out with this? Eventually, yes, I would love to record this. I am doing it in Salad right now. Still got a little bit of ways to go within Salad. But after that, I could easily see myself pivoting to be 2021 heavily focused on recording Juniper content for you, especially the service provider world. Why did I choose service provider over enterprise? Because I'm just so over spanning tree, and I really wanted to learn more about MPLS. Was really caught off guard. The service provider world is a completely different world, and you may think you're good at networking, and then you get here and you realize, nope, this is some heavy hitting stuff. And I think that's why, I passed with a 78%, which was a healthy score. Probably if I had done it over again, if I were taking this exam over again, knowing what I know now, I would look at all of these topics on the blueprint and force myself to go just a step beyond, hit that question mark and go, that looks cool, what does that do? And then look it up in Junos documentation. Also, highly recommend networkfuntimes.com, the blog, fantastic blog, wildly helpful in the Juniper service provider world. Lots of topics there that I was very interested in that were illuminated very well. So thank you, networkfuntimes.com blog. And I will be blogging about this more on datanox.dev. So check that out. Other things that probably hurt me, let me just throw this out there too while I was preparing. Let me bring this over here. Things that probably hurt me were the fact that I spent a whole lot of time automating the deployment of this stuff. So like the configuration of ISIS, if I look, like I just made like Jinja templates for these things. The Mpls template here, I just made a Jinja template to automate the deployment of Mpls with RSVP, with CSPF. And that way I didn't type the commands over and over and over again. It took me away from the command line where I should have been and typing the question mark. But my, the entire way that Juniper works, where like every command that you do, even the config, is display XML. I mean, look at that. There's your payload right there. All you have to do is send this in with some Jinja templates, and that's how you can automate a Juniper device very easily. So that's really what I did here is I typed the config, I did display XML, I copied it out, and I turned it into a Jinja template, and then turned that into a Nornir runbook, or whatever you want to call Nornir script, that automated the deployment of MPLS and RSVP and CSPF throughout my entire environment. And, it worked perfectly. It did what automation was supposed to do, alleviated human error from typing things wrong or forgetting this one command. But at the same time, like, in order to get certified, you need to know those commands and you need to know how to type them right. So that probably, my own automation curiosity probably hurt me a little bit there. So let me jump over to questions now. I've been rambling for a while, so let me jump up here. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up. Does VSRX work? Yes, VSRX and VMX work in EVE-NG. For this exam, service provider, you want to use VMX. VSRXs are for the security track, and not that they're not prevalent in the service provider world, but they're really used largely by, I could be misspeaking completely. It feels like they're largely used by enterprises as their firewall. Taking it a step further, the SD-WAN solution from Juniper, you don't need to buy special hardware with that. You can actually use the SRX devices in order to do SD-WAN, because SD-WAN, the Juniper SD-WAN solution, is built to communicate to SRX devices, which is pretty cool. It's on your list after SP Core. Tell you what, SP Core is on my list too now. That's pretty cool. Let's see. VMX enough. Yep, looking good. Displayed that. Yeah, so that's pretty good comments here going across this. What's next? The birth of my twins. That feels like it's looming on the headlines. I will. A project that I want to work on is I want to contribute to PyATS. I want to contribute. So Dell, I don't know if y'all knew this, but Dell makes switches. They're called power switches. That's actually like their brand, the Dell Power Switch. I would like, but they don't have any like automation capabilities. Like there's no automating protocol. There's no API that I know of. You can use Ansible. There are Ansible playbooks for Dell right now. I would like to build the connector, the device connector and plug-in for PyATS to connect to Dell switches. I have already written some parsers for the Dell switches so far, but that's a project that I want to work on right now. Next up after that, JNCIP service provider. I mean, I want to take this further. I didn't feel like I got enough layer 2 connectivity. I mean, I know MPLS layer 3 VPN inside and out in the Cisco world. I want to learn it in the Juniper world. Then I want to automate it. And I don't know very much at all about layer 2 VPNs like VPLS outside of the basic Q&Q bridging that would be on the JNCIP. So I'm very interested in JNCIP. That is probably where I'm going to go next. This exam, having caught me off guard in the way that it did, is going to make me pace myself and pay a lot closer attention to JNCIP. So that is what I'm thinking about. Do I have a photographic memory? No, or I probably would have scored higher than a 78%. But I've just, over the years, just gotten good at studying and practice. Can't stress it enough. The EVE-NG lab so many times here, this EvenG lab bailed me out over the past couple weeks because I could right-click on a link and go to capture and say, run a Wireshark capture on gig 01 there. And here it comes. We'll say it's an Ethernet. Yep, and there it goes. This helped me out. Look at those BFD sessions going back and forth because of the MPLS tunnels. And I think I'm actually running BFD on ISIS as well. I got to check that out. But yeah, so I mean, so many times did this help me troubleshoot because especially when I was doing the Q&Q bridging, I would actually watch a broadcast packet come in from a customer edge, and it was making its way all the way out to the other provider edge and then dying there. And I had to figure out why, and that's where EvenG bailed me out there. So labbing, can't stress that part enough. That's a huge part to my success. A Cisco Espresso demo, that's something that also sounds really cool. I think I might look into that a little bit more once I get more familiar with PyATS's architecture. Like I say, I want to write the plugin for the Dell OS 6 operating system. I can actually show you real quick. Where'd it go? I think right there, Dell OS 6. There it is. See it? Looks just like any other terminal, right? But check this out. It's like show IP brief. Or show interface. Was it interface brief? Is it? Nope, that's not it. Show interfaces. See, I've already forgotten the commands. Show IP. I thought it was brief. Why isn't it brief? Oh well, I'll figure it out. There's all sorts of commands. I got to get to know this information better. Maybe show IP interface. There it is. That's what I was looking for. Show IP interface. So I want to get to know like this stuff a little bit better on the Dell side of things, as well to how to hook it into PyATS. I have written parsers for this already, but they're not usable in PyATS because PyATS isn't able to connect to Dell OS 6. This is using version 6. They call this OS 6. And you can see the product right here. This is a Dell N1548. That's basically a 48-port small business router used by Dell switches. So yeah, there you go. So that's what I really want to focus on right now. That's going to be my little project that's going to keep me busy. Focusing a lot more on blogging, focusing on datanox.dev, focusing a lot more on YouTube content. We are going to be rolling out Score on CBT Nuggets any minute now. And I mean like literally any minute now. It might be today, it might be tomorrow, it might be the end of the week. I don't know. It's like literally any minute now. We want to roll out DevCore ASAP because that content, I really believe that's going to be the best content CBT Nuggets has ever produced. I'm not kidding. It is amazing. Then, recording some Juniper stuff, but this is all kind of coming in line with when the babies are due. So that's going to be a tough one. CCIE lab status. What is the CCIE lab status? Probably still closed. Nothing I can do about it. If the lab center is shut down, and I can only read the same chapter on OSPF so many times. Hence why I'm like, I need something to stimulate my brain right now. So that's why I went down the service provider track. I was always interested in service provider. I did not realize it was as difficult as it was. That the expertise you need to have in how to engineer these IGPs and MPLS, I really wasn't aware that this world was out there, and it really, really caught me off guard. Like my first 3 or 4 days watching the Junos Genius content, we need to talk about that. Okay, yeah. Sorry guys, we're gonna take this is a big talking point if you're gonna go down the Junos Genius route. I feel strongly that this content is out of order. So my recommendation to you is do not watch any of the e-learning courses first. Don't do that. Jump down to the certification prep videos first. Watch this section first because these really are the introductory points of what these topics do. Scrolling down like a hair. Let's take a look. So here's like MPLS concepts and MPLS monitoring. This will cover the basics of RSVP, versus LDP, and a little bit of basics on CSPF. If you watch the MPLS concept section first, so first watch these in order. They're in the correct order. But watch the certification prep section first. Like, you'll need to have an IGP running before you run MPLS. It's just going to make your world a lot easier. So once you've watched those, you can come back up to these e-learning courses. But then I recommend watching them in a different order yet again. I would say watch OSPF first, BGP second, label distribution protocols third, constrained shortest path fourth. Then the rest of these three are kind of a toss-up. Provider bridging, let me tell you. Between provider bridging and CSPF, these two are going to turn your brain to mush if you've never seen these before. Not because the training is bad. The training is good. It's just, coming from the enterprise world, you're just like, whoa, what just happened? I just went cross-eyed. Like, it's really fascinating stuff, y'all. You think you're good at networking, and then you do that. So that's what I would say do. Do the certification prep videos, and then do the e-learning courses videos, but the e-learning courses are also out of order. Absolutely do not do CSPF before you do label distribution protocols. And if you're going to do label distribution protocols, it's nice to have an IGP running first. So turn on OSPF or ISIS first before you jump into MPLS. So that's my recommendation for how to use Junos Genius. Do I practice using JWeb or CLI? I use the CLI exclusively. And like I said earlier, that is a problem for me because I hate typing the same commands over and over again. So I ended up automating the deployment of everything. I automated the deployment of multi-chassis link aggregation. I automated the deployment of, let me see, hang on, I'll show you. So first of all, I automated just the base config of my EVE-NG devices. Right there, you can see all of the base config commands right there. This uses the EVE-NG API. EVE-NG does have an API. So this accesses the native console of all of the devices on my topology and issues those commands and then commits them. So the base config is done. Then, where is it? Configure INTs. Yep. Then I set the IP address configurations on each of the nodes. All of that comes from the hosts file here under the interfaces section. Then, of course, you may be looking ahead. You see the ISIS configuration. So I run the config ISIS script, which, where is it? Yep, there's two parts to this. There's the ISIS interfaces, and then the ISIS protocol configuration itself. And then I ran the deploy MPLS configuration, which is the protocol section here, which deploys MPLS and RSVP with CSPF. So I do everything from the command line. The problem with that is I only did it once or twice, and then just was like, I can't type these commands over and over again. That's so boring. So I'm just going to copy the XML out and create automation scripts that do the whole thing for me. And that is literally how this lab came to be. I just automated it. And that's just because Juniper is just so stinking fancy. And the fact that everything you do is, let's just click top. Show. What does that look like to you? Looks like JSON. And in fact, I can do show pipe to display JSON. There it is in JSON. And if I was doing it based on the XML netconf structure, which is what you just saw, I can do show display XML. There's the entire config in XML. So all I have to do is copy this out and turn it into a Jinja template. And that's exactly what I did. Because this is what Juniper does. Look, every command you type on Juniper, it looks like a CLI command, right? And it looks like you get CLI output. That's not what happened. What happened under the hood is it actually ran an API RPC, get interface information, and explicitly said, give me the terse information. And then the results that came back were XML. Like, Juniper has been automating their own operating system for 20 years now. And all netconf did is it just exposed this over SSH. That's it. That's all it did. This is already here, already built into Junos. So all I have to do now is just access it over netconf, which is what my Nornir PyEZ plugin does. So yeah, I mean, if you're new to network automation, Juniper is amazing for that. If you like Nornir for any reason, and you're new to Juniper, that's a new one. If you like Nornir and you're new to Juniper, I created the PyEZ plugin, which can actually run Juniper-based commands, the Juniper PyEZ SDK, concurrently using Nornir. And the documentation has examples on how to use all of it, to send in configurations, to get data. It's super fancy, and that's exactly what I used here to deploy all of these protocols throughout my entire topology. So, yeah, skip the L2. I did skip the layer 2 stuff. Again, you can only read spanning tree protocol so many times before you're just like, I can't go through the RSTP machine state anymore. Like, I just can't do it. So I just need something new. And that's what I want to do. What blogs or reading material would I suggest for someone who is new to getting started to network automation? Well, CBT Nuggets, of course. We've got Devnet Associate, Inauto, DevCore is coming very soon, and JNCIA DevOps. The JNCIA DevOps exam is not only in Junis Genius, it's also in CBT Nuggets. Then, once you're comfortable with the concepts of network automation, you want to start learning Nornir or Ansible. Highly recommend Nornir. It's very fun and handy. John McGovern's content there in CBT Nuggets, Advanced Network Automation with Nornir. You know him on Twitter as IPv0. As far as books go, I've got a lot of books that I've talked about. So I got a video on YouTube called "How Much Python Do You Need to Know for Devnet Associate?" That's really applicable. How much Python do you need to know for network automation? And I cover the books that will help you get started learning network automation. But as far as video training goes, check out more on my YouTube channel. Check out John McGovern's YouTube channel, IPv0. Follow us on Twitter and hit up CBT Nuggets because we've got network automation on lock. With VMXs in Eve, did you try exporting and importing the startup configs? Let's find out. So Eve documentation says that it is supported. So let's do this guy right here, just VMX VCP3. Starting export. If I jump in, oh, it failed. Failed to export. Let's take a look at the startup configs real quick and make sure. Nope, I keep clicking the wrong button. Come here, startup configs. Does not look like it works. So that's, 2 talking points now. I guess the exporting configs doesn't work on VMX. Also, the VQFX switches, version 20 does not work in any QEMU emulator. You have to use the older VQFX images. I think they're version 17 that does work. But for the service provider certification track, the VMXs are really all you need. Let's go back to some questions. Can I share the lab in Eve? It wouldn't do you much good because it'd just be like all of these appliances here. They wouldn't have any configurations. So it'd be on you to be assigning IP addresses and configuring them. So you might as well just do it on your own. Not a big deal. Am I going to make any PowerShell videos? I have created the course on CBT Nuggets on PowerShell 7. It is, I think it's like Learn Programming with PowerShell 7. Let's jump over to cbtnuggets.com real quick. And I'm already signed in. Search for PowerShell 7. Programming Foundations with PowerShell 7. So if you want to learn from scratch how to program any code in general, just coding foundations using PowerShell 7, this is what you want to check it out. It's 104 videos, and we end up somewhere with like real-world automation with PowerShell. I also have recorded network automation with PowerShell on CBT Nuggets, so you can use either of those resources at your pleasure. Let's see. What sources did I use for JNCIS-SP? Good books are hard to come by for service provider. MPLS in the SDN era was really the only book that I used. And the biggest advice that I could give is when you start making configuration changes on your Juniper devices, hit that question mark, look at what your options are, and then research Juniper documentation on what those options really do. Juniper documentation is going to be your best textbook when you're very curious about what does this feature really do. VMX, whatever the latest version was, I think that was VMX 18. Let's see. Go to VMX VCP 18.2 R1.9. That naming convention is something that you learn about as you learn through the JNCIA Junos studies. I did not use Nick's book at all for this certification exam. I don't think I needed to go to the expert level yet for this exam. Again, the Junos Genius, I passed. So clearly Junos Genius does the job. I used networkfuntimes.com's blog just out of curiosity, and evenG for lab, get those commands built into your brain. But again, very few reading resources, heavy on the Junos Genius video resources. The only real book that I used was MPLS in the SDN era, and I'm not even done reading it. I'm only 20% done reading it. But yeah, those were really the only books that I used. Yeah, I mean, so there's clearly some versioning things that are going on with the evenG and the Juniper devices. The VSRXs I've had no issues with. Operating the VMX devices I've had no issues with. Exporting the configs was the first issue I've seen. And then the VQFX doesn't work at all. I mean, they turn on, you can access the shell of them, but they will not, the forwarding plane devices don't work. They will not forward any packets whatsoever. So you won't see, if you turn spanning tree on, you won't see any BPDUs, link aggregation, you won't see any of that control plane stuff. So there's that. For the most part, the VMX devices get the job done. What you can't see is sitting to the right of me, I have 3 Juniper switches. Sitting over here, I have 2 EX4200s and an EX2200. The EX2200s are much cheaper and much quieter. The 4200s don't really do anything extra than the 2200s. So if you're looking for a physical lab for Juniper devices, go with the EX2200s. I also have a physical SRX 300 sitting over there next to me as well. Yeah, Ahmad, I actually covered that a little bit earlier in this video. They are 2 separate devices. There is the control plane and the forwarding plane that you do have to connect over the INT link. So if you missed that, you can rewatch it earlier in this video. I actually demonstrated how to lay them out and connect them together and how that works. That's why you see 2 appliances here. See, whoop, like that. Woo, 2 appliances there actually make up the 1 appliance for the control plane 1 there. So, yeah. So, that has been my take on the Juniper certification exams. Interesting thing I want to point out real quick. Let me go back real quick. The tracks, we already pointed this out. The JNCIA Junos gets you down the road towards service provider, enterprise, and data center. Notice this too. Enterprise shows up in 2 places as well. So if you're interested in data center, you can do enterprise, and that also counts towards your data center. And then you don't really do data center stuff until you get to the professional level. Whereas service provider, that's where it does break off from the JNCIA, and they have its own exam. Enterprise, this question probably is going to come up. Why did I choose service provider over enterprise? I just can't do spanning tree protocol anymore. Just can't do it. I hate it. I hate it so much. It's just controlled chaos, and I had a huge amount of intellectual curiosity around MPLS, and the JNCIS content has more than stimulated that. Fanatical about the service provider world, and how powerful it is in truly engineering routes from one path to the next. And that logically makes sense. I mean, you know, the service provider world, you're talking routers with 600,000, 800,000 routes. You need to be able to engineer your paths. And that kind of complexity, when it comes to routing, that kind of complexity doesn't exist in most enterprises. It just exists in the service provider world. And that's why I'm just going to be honest with you, like the service provider world really, really beat me up and really caught me off guard and brought my ego down a bit. It made me realize I got a long way to go. Intimidated me. So at the same time, it makes me all the more excited about the jncip. So there's that. So let's see. Yeah, what's next for Juniper is going to be the jncip service provider. I'd be lying if I said if I wasn't eyeing that jncis DevOps, but that's one of those things like I don't feel like I need that certification. I don't need that validation. Like I do Juniper automation a lot. You can check my GitHub repos for that, including the Nornir PyEZ library. So, you know, I appreciate that exam, that it exists, but it's not the end goal for me. If they had a professional level, if there was a jncip professional, a jncip DevOps, then I'd be in. I'd be interested in that, but it stops at specialist, and I kind of want to get to professional. I don't want to pivot off of service provider until I feel like I've seen service provider through and I get a better understanding for these technologies. So I'm going to end the live stream there. I really appreciate y'all stopping by and chatting with me about this. If you're new to service provider, if you've got any intellectual curiosity, this is the starting point. SP, starting point. If you're new to that, that's what I recommend. Jump into JNCI service provider, but brace for impact. Heavy hitting content. Tough exam. Definitely going to take 2 to 4 weeks of dedicated study to pass it. So, that's all I got. Cones of Dunshire. It's about the cones. Thanks for stopping by, y'all. See you in the next one.